just hit the record then. Learned that from here. Yeah.
There you
Because
go.
I've been putting I don't know how many people are on our Patreon, but I put it up for a few people, so that's cool. But
Yeah.
on Japanese Breakfast, Luke, my sci-fi co-host, who also loves Pokemon, he last year on the vacation, he was just walking in some town and stumbled across some breakfast cafe that was Pokemon themed, and he was like, "Oh God,
my God.
they just instantly got $50 from him, right?"
Yeah, right.
So
Oh God.
that was kind of cool.
That's awesome.
Oh, and
Yeah.
just the other thing I thought was fun. For my birthday, I almost pulled the trigger on the Mission Impossible Blu-ray set.
Mm-hmm.
But then I was like, well, I'm doing Twilight, so I gotta get the '80s one, right?
Yeah,
and
right.
then I bundled that. The Batman set was like $30. I was like, with the movies, the animated one. I was like, I have to go for that. But
That's pretty great. Yeah.
and anyway, in your Discord, I brought up the '80s Twilight Zone that quickly de-evolved into a conversation where people were imagining Worf on Goff, if you remember the Tim Conway
Yes,
videos.
I absolutely do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this water. Someone wrote like, this water hazard has no honor. It was great.
Ah,
I still want to see that now.
that's awesome. That's awesome. Um, yeah, I I think I told you, I mean, my only time in Japan was very all too brief, and it was a while back. I mean, it was like 2002, something like that. So it was a while ago. But I had just such a good time there, and everywhere I went, the food was amazing. And I need to get back, but there's a lot of places to go in the world.
Yeah,
So
my concern is when I do get back to the States, I'll have just this insane reverse culture shock. So,
yeah, right, exactly.
I
Yeah.
look at like the pizzas. When I grew up, we'd go to Rehoboth Beach, Delaware. My aunt lives there, and they have a lot of pizza places. And man, that's my favorite food ever for so long. And I look at a picture on the internet, and I'm like, if I eat that, I'll have a heart attack.
Yeah, right,
Don't know
right.
if I can handle it anymore. So
Yeah. But man, it definitely did a number on me. Like I think I told you that, I just had such incredible food the whole time that I was there. And I didn't miss, like, I felt healthier for sure when I didn't live there, just stayed there for a little while. I felt healthier coming back, but man, as soon as I was on the plane coming back, I started craving a cheeseburger or something fierce. Like I so needed that. It just oh that was an intense craving.
I've come
Yeah.
back a few times and always lost weight. Actually, I haven't been out of Japan since 2010 either. And
Oh wow.
just before I left, there's a picture actually at a Trader Vic's where I'm just like really fat. So I currently, let's see if I can do some pounds. I think I'm probably about 180 these days, and I think I was like
Okay.
210 or something in this photo.
Oh
So
man.
it's horrible.
Oh
So
man.
that's one reason I can't live in the States.
Yeah, no, I get it. I get it for sure.
Let's jump into this episode, I
Yeah.
suppose. Oh, all right, I'm getting a little bit of scratch from a microphone. There we go. So I'll
I'll
just
do
go
a
ahead.
I'll do a local recording if you
Okay.
want.
Never hurts.
Yeah. There we go. That is on just in case you need it. I'll have it for you. Yeah.
Okay. Welcome to, actually, I'm going to stay quiet for 5 seconds so I can really easily see it. You do recording. I'm just going to shut up for a minute. That should do a trick. Okay. Hello, welcome to Time Enough Podcast, where we talk about episodes of The Twilight Zone and beyond. This is Matt here. Today, with me is a returnee. He's from the Mission Log podcast at Roddenberry Podcasts. Hello, John Champion.
Hello. Thanks for having me back. And thanks for letting me talk about Twilight Zone again.
Right on. I mean, I get way ahead with recording these sometimes just because they're really fun to do. So
Right.
it's hard not to get ahead of it. But
Don't blame you.
really quick, one thing I've been trying to get in the habit of is having guests give their upfront where to find them. So if you could tell people where to do that.
Oh, sure. I'll make that short and sweet because you already said it. Podcast.roddenberry.com. I've got a bunch of shows there. Mission Log Live, Trek Files, Sci-Fi 5, Mission Log The Orville, just a Mission Log Prodigy, ton of stuff there. So come to podcast.roddenberry.com and find what you like and then subscribe. There you go. Easy enough, right?
Right on. Okay. Well, I'm going to jump into a bit of the info on A World of Difference, today's episode. This written was episoded by. I feel like I'm slowly getting more dyslexic as I get older. Okay.
Yeah, fair. Yeah.
This episode was written by Twilight Zone sharpshooter Richard Matheson. He's not Rod Serling, but he was one of the prime pinch hitters for this show and later iterations. Ted Post directed this jam besides a bunch of other Twilight Zone episodes. His own was in the Wild West with TV shows like Gunsmoke, Rawhide, and Wagon Train, and he directed a whole lot of Peyton Place as well, but it's his film credit on Beneath the Planet of the Apes that really lights my fire.
Nice.
You can call him author, you can call him Gary, but he's really Howard Duff, and he made his name on radio as Sam Spade. This led to a bunch of noir appearances in films circling 1950, like The Naked City. He kept working until his passing into the next Bardo in 1990, notably appearing as Dustin Hoffman's attorney in Kramer versus Kramer. For those keeping track of the Twilight Zone synchronicities, he was married to actor-director Ida Lupino, who we last saw in the 16mm Shrine, with their coincidence
Cool.
with you here, John.
Yeah, nice. Like
Aleem Ryan plays Nora. Her acting career is not unimpressive, but not particularly prolific. She was more prolific in birthing Penn brothers, Sean, Chris, and Michael. After a brief spurt of work, including this, she took a big break before taking a victory lap of showing up in her son's movies. And finally, Brinkley is played by David White. You may recognize his face as you played Darren's boss, Larry Tate, in Bewitched. So, wow, yes. I wrote this. Yeah, I wrote it a week ago. Now I'm like, oh, really? Oh, cool.
Yeah, right. Well, and hey, since you mentioned Ted Post, who's directing credits, I honestly didn't know, but you said Peyton Place, and Eileen Ryan was on Peyton Place. I don't know if she was on a lot, but I know that she did some. So I don't know if that was something that they knew each other from before and, kept working together or what. But that's kind of another little connection there. And speaking of Ted Post, you said he directed Beneath the Planet of the Apes, right?
Oh, yes, the second one.
Yeah. So I just was at a screening for Planet of the Apes last night, the 1968 original, hosted by Dr. Zaius.
All right.
So,
I'll try not to sing the song from The Simpsons.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I don't want to get into a copyright thing there. Yeah, but Dr. Zaius was there to introduce the film and had some makeup and effects artists from the later, the Tim Burton, the reimagined Apes movies. And it was just great. It was great to see that on a huge screen at the Academy Museum. And of course, tied into our show today, screenplay, story by Rod Serling based on the Pierre Boulle book, but really the script, the screenplay was by Michael Wilson.
We could smell some of his scent on when we did what was it? I shot an arrow into the air, I think, and there's a sequence of the astronauts kind of stumbling through the desert, and we're like, this is super Planet of the Apes like.
Right, yeah.
But I have a weird thing with that series where I know the first one's obviously like the best one, but I kind of enjoy the series as it goes. Like it gets so whack by the battle. I'm just like, I love this. I love that they don't have money anymore,
Yep.
But they've gotten way too ambitious. It's fantastic. Have not done the TV series yet, but
you know what? The TV series is good. The animated series is really good. Because like Star Trek going to animated, they were able to take a bunch of liberties with it and just do crazy stuff that, a live action budget wouldn't allow. So they were able to spend more time with the apes and develop more characters. And yeah, it was just, it was cool. And I want to say, if I'm right, General Urko is voiced by the same guy who voiced Fred Flintstone. So, yeah.
As we're recording this, there was actually just a Will Wheaton post where he was, I guess, trying to promote someone's thing where they had made like Star Trek: The Next Generation animated series with like the Filmation style, and they put the music clips in, and
it is ridiculously good. It is so good. You have to go check it out.
Yeah. I watched it actually at the 10 minutes before we started this, so I was like, this is great. Yeah.
Oh man, insanely good.
Just to throw back into the zone. Here is today's prologue. As usual, you can read it any way you want. You can get your teeth dry, or you could take a different approach.
You're looking at a tableau of reality, things of substance, of physical material, a desk, a window, a light. These things exist and have dimension. Now, this is Arthur Curtis, age 36, who is also real. He has flesh and blood, muscle and mind, but in just a moment, we will see how thin a line separates that which we assume to be real with that manufactured inside of a mind.
All right. So it's kind of like
Oh.
imposter syndrome, the episode in a way.
Yes, exactly.
Which
Exactly. Arthur Curtis slash Jerry Reagan.
that's almost, yeah, that's, and then you got the actor himself. We're getting into like Garth Marenghi territory there, which I'd been
Right.
podcasting as we're talking about, like, which name should we use? We don't know what to
Yeah,
call
yeah,
these
yeah, yeah.
people. Is it Garth? Is it Matthew? What's his name? Is it
Yeah.
Dr. Whatever? Yeah, see, I've forgotten all the names now, but I finished doing that a month ago, so I can
Okay, cool. Yeah,
memory drum.
yeah.
Now that I've been doing this as a series, when as you start to notice things you never would when you start going through every single episode.
Yeah,
And the Twilight Zone is, of course, famous for the twist, even though there's a few episodes that don't really have one. But
sure.
especially in the season one, I've been finding the other big thing is the effect. There's always some really low budget, but super just like not sophisticated, elegant effect. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Now, do you know what I'm talking about in this episode? It's
I'm
really
trying to. I mean, I was wondering if you're talking about a lighting thing, either when Arthur is leaving when he stops being Arthur in the opening scene and starts being Jerry. Well, entering Jerry's world during the first scene, or is it the return, Jerry becoming Arthur again at the end? I
it's
don't know.
it's both
Okay.
because the set, if it's a continuous shot, this is a very subtle
Yeah.
effect. That's why I like it so much. He's talking to his secretary. The camera follows him into his office where you see the whole office. You see
Yeah.
all, I think you see four walls of the office.
But then
um
they close up that wall,
yeah, they had a
right?
fake
Yeah. Yeah.
they had
Yeah.
a fake wall, and just,
Yeah.
but the thing is, I don't know why you can't do ADR or something, but they apparently had trouble making it the wall like silent, like they had.
Oh,
I
I
guess
didn't
they,
even notice that.
that's why I
Is
like
that?
this effect so much, because I'm like, you don't notice it until someone tells you about it or you read about it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, that's very cool. So there's a lighting change there anyway. But then, yeah, that is a great point where just move that wall and then boom, you're in his world entirely.
Not quite as
Yeah.
obvious as the walking talking slot machine and the fever, but that's fantastically stupid. I mean,
Nothing is as obvious as that. Yeah.
so yeah, that
Yeah.
one sticks out to you. But yeah, I guess, do you have any impressions you wanted to throw off? This was one of the ones you chose, so.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, it's a nice parallel to 16 millimeter Shrine, because you've got this similar thing with actors who are sort of lost in the character slash now the character is lost in the actor. And the other thing that I mentioned with 16 millimeter Shrine is that I feel like this is one of those very interesting, ambiguous stories where you look at it and on the surface you go, okay, here's a person who is going mad. And when we get to know his life and you see like all the pressures on him, his wife who is just being awful. I mean, they really like crank that up to 11 with Nora. Um, you start to have all this sympathy for Jerry and you want him to have the life of Arthur Curtis. And in the end, he gets what he wants. He gets this relief of being Arthur Curtis, even though Arthur Curtis only exists on paper. Well, go back to our protagonist in the 16 millimeter Shrine, and it's kind of a similar thing. It's like you can put all these things together in your head and say, well, are they dead? Are they going out of their minds? Where do they actually exist anymore in the real world? And in her case, just existing on celluloid, or in this case, existing maybe only in that the printed pages of that script, which is the last thing we see in the episode. So I had to wonder, what is the writer's attitude toward the character and what is the intended attitude of the audience to have? Because from one point of view you can say, well, he's lost his mind, and where is he? He's gone. He's totally lost touch with reality. But on the other hand, you can say, but he got what he wanted, and maybe he's okay now. Maybe he's better off with Marion and the little girl whose name I forget. Off, yeah, that last shot you see is the TWA 707 going off on their trip. All right, does that exist? Do they exist on that plane? You just seem to be kind of sending a signal that says no, his life is actually carrying on, but he's carrying on in the fantasy of this construct. So I don't know. It kind of leaves us with a pleasant bit of ambiguity.
Yeah, that was in the trivia finding out that Nora is played by, Sean Penn's mom. I'm like, oh, like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, we got angry Sean Penn. I can kind of maybe see where he got those chops from, because she's
she's oh man, she's a lot. Yeah, she's gorgeous. She's absolutely. I mean, one of the things that I love about an episode like this, I love when Hollywood gets to play Hollywood. I love when you actually get to use a studio as a studio and the streets of LA as the streets of LA. It's very cool. And she's perfect casting because she looks like this 1950s movie star, and she's just very stylish. But then, man, as soon as she opens her mouth and puts Jerry in his place, watch out.
well, the
Yeah.
first thing she does, I mean, is almost hit him with her car. But the second thing she does is
Yeah.
kind of try to help him up, right? And they're like, oh,
Yeah.
maybe this is, and then within 2 seconds, it's like, oh, he has just stepped in it.
Yeah. It's
Now,
not like nothing is going to go well for him.
of course, I have guests like you do the prologues, but just as a little experiment here, I'm going to do the prologue slightly differently and starting in the middle.
Oh, nice. Okay. All right.
Now, this is Arthur Curtis, age 36, who's also real. He has flesh and blood, muscle and mind, slowly decaying, slowly going towards the ravages of old age. His family life deteriorating about him, his job a dead end. So, in this alternate episode, his life sucks, and when the wall comes up, everything's peachy. And maybe the twist at the end is he ends up stuck in his terrible life again. But
yeah, it could be.
The idea being the prologue, these often paint your protagonist like, with a very white brush. Like, this is a dirty man, a scummy man,
Right.
And that's when this guy's going to bite it by the end of the episode. So,
yeah.
But I was thinking you could easily tweak this episode to go that way instead. And would that be more or less effective?
Well, see, as you're saying this, I wonder, is this could this almost be a parable about the grass not being greener? Because the longer Jerry spends in Arthur's world, that could be terrible too. Yeah, that could be an absolutely awful way to spend your life, and maybe the lesson could be, oh, you may look at this construct of the successful businessman, which 36 I'm going to say is not middle age, but you look at his life and maybe he's stuck in this never ending loop of work and then home and then work and then home, and he may love his family, but he may not be finding fulfillment in the things that he does. So it's hard to say that somebody else's life is actually the better proposition where you would rather spend your time. What we do know for sure is that Jerry has reached a point in his life that he can't continue,
Actually, I feel like this should have occurred to me earlier because I just talked about this, but there is the opposite of this, more or less. On my sci-fi podcast last month, we covered Seconds with Rock Hudson, which has, it starts off with the aging guy in his dead end life, and getting this opportunity to become Rock Hudson and live in Malibu, and that turns to crap. So I was like, okay, that actually is the opposite of this episode.
Yeah. Right.
I guess that would be how it turns out. I mean, obviously, the Twilight Zone 25-minute format, it would be something different, but that's kind of one of the fun things. Like, okay, they made these decisions to get this certain tone, and just a few tweaks in those decisions would really change the tone.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, yeah. I also want to point out a few other things. That the I I was very surprised that Bernard Herrmann doesn't get the music credit on this episode, because there are scenes early in the show when he and Nora are leaving the studio. Absolutely sounds like a riff on Bernard Herrmann's North by Northwest score. So I don't know if they just had something that Bernard Herrmann had recorded earlier, and then they decided, like, let's save that for this episode, and they brought that in. But then the music tonally takes a big shift, and then you have that very like 50s sci-fi theremin sounding, like high pitched warbly. It's a very different tone from what we have in the first half of the episode. And the other thing is bad ADR, because you mentioned it earlier, the little girl that he
Oh, right.
mistakes for his daughter, and it's just this long cut where they could have dropped out in half as much time, where it's like, mommy, that's the man who scared me. There he is. That's the man. Mommy, he scared me. Like, please stop, because this little girl is not, her mouth is not moving. She's just pointing, and
that
it's
that was that was the
not a good
producer
scene.
saying it's not clear. We need to make sure it's clear.
Yeah, yeah, right, right, right. We have so many more seconds to kill before our first ad break.
with
Yeah.
with the music, I think they say it in the Twilight Zone companion that due to like musician unions and due to budgets at the studio, there was kind of this formula where this percent of the music is library music, this percent of the music is reappropriated from another film, and this
Yeah.
percent you can get composers.
Okay.
For example, when he did The Hitchhiker, it does have a Bernard Herrmann score, and I think they credited him on that one. But the
Okay.
score is from the radio drama version 15 years earlier, which was
Oh,
actually like one of his
wow.
first.
Wow.
I think it was one of his first American credits.
Oh, interesting. Wow.
So
Wow.
he still
Yeah.
scored it, but not he wasn't actively scoring that. And I make music for some weird Z grade low budget movies. Awesome one. Sorry, the Gon's horrific. I shout him out because because he shows up on this podcast. But anyway, there's been a few times where I did compose specifically for him, but usually I'll just send him like instrumental versions of the tracks I'm working on and let him do what he wants with them. So,
Sure. Yeah. Why not?
but yeah,
Very cool.
awesome grade Z movies. Nah, he likes being called weird. It's fine. Okay.
Hey, if the shoe fits. Yeah.
Exactly. Nobody weird
Yeah.
like me. There we go.
Yeah.
Another thing that I definitely like thinking of when we get to these episodes are the reactions when people end up in these situations. Some past ones would be Marty flipping out and walking distance and making every time traveler mistake possible. Uh, and then there's people like the Purple Testament just aired on the actual stream, and that one the guy is very stoic and barely tells the superior what's happening. He kind of keeps it to himself. So
Yeah.
this is a pretty jarring shift. I mean, if I look around and it's a movie, yeah, that really is going to play with anyone's mind, probably more than walking into your childhood town.
Sure, sure, yeah, yeah. I mean, I think the other thing that's very interesting, that is the very obvious thing we haven't talked about, and that is, look, there's one actor's nightmare that is the persistent one, that you show up for your job and you don't know your lines. You're shoved out on stage, and all that rehearsal, everything is just completely left your brain, and that is the classic actor's nightmare. There's the other nightmare that's happening here, which is that you are so entrenched in a role that you have completely lost your own sense of identity and sense of self. And there's something very real about that, though, which I know I'm going to bring up on Mission Log again at the right point when we talk about kind of the cohesion of the cast on Voyager. But it's something that Nana Visitor brought up when she did her interview with us and talking about playing Colonel Kira. Which is that that headspace that you have to be in, because you have to live the emotional reality of that character. Otherwise, it comes across as very fake and very, very transparent on TV. Is it you start to think like that character, and then you start to react like that character, and people react to you as that character, and it does a number on you, and particularly if you're doing that, 12 to 16 hours a day for the better part of a year at a time, when you're doing a show like that that has the demands of making you stay in that character. So here's Jerry Reagan as Arthur Curtis, maybe an actor who is so good at his job that he has completely lost his own identity, that those words, that life, those experiences, and those other characters just come that naturally to him because he is lost in the role. So I could see where an actor could identify with what's going on with Jerry here.
One thing I have to call myself an anti-actor. I can't act. I've been in one movie. It's on YouTube to
Okay.
absolutely prove I
Okay.
cannot act.
Mm-hmm.
I showed it to my wife once, and there's a scene where I'm at the computer, and she's like, "You're reading your lines off the screen." I'm like, "Well, it's there.
It's right there. Why wouldn't you?
Why
Yeah.
exactly? Why shouldn't I
Yeah.
be?"
Yeah.
But yeah, you mentioned up the Colonel Kira
Yeah.
thing. This would be kind of the opposite, though. It's kind of like Jerry's life is horrible, and then because
Mhm.
you don't really want to escape into Colonel Kira's life. That's
No. But I mean, she's saying that it's just inevitable. Like
Mm-mm.
it just happens because you spend such a long time in that headspace that just no matter what, it's there.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know.
my point is, she kind of
Yeah.
said it was giving her like kind of nightmares, like right of that
Mm-hmm.
being in that
Yeah.
character.
Yeah.
Whereas
Yeah.
if we go ahead and take the actor kind of perspective that Jerry is the real person,
Yeah.
then he's escaping into his role. Like it's a pleasant
Yeah.
place to
Yeah.
be. So it's kind of the interest. I
Sure.
mean, again, it's kind of the opposite of what you're mentioning,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
the same
Yeah.
thing, just the other side of the
Yeah,
coin, right?
but better outcome for him. Maybe a better outcome for him. Except that he's gonna keep trying to go to work at an office that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
you know,
And
yeah,
then author conversely has zero acting abilities because he cannot roll with any of these situations. I mean,
yeah,
the Howard Duff can act, sure. But now we're
yeah,
thinking about author who cannot respond to these situations with anything but like incredulity.
yeah. Which is a tough thing for an actor to pull off, to play both of those roles and both realities. He's awfully good at it. By the way, did you see? I think I told you before. I watch everything with closed captions at least once when I'm preparing for something like this or a mission log or whatever, just because I want to make sure that I get the details. And there is that scene where Nora is yelling at Jerry, getting him to sign the divorce papers, and she sign your name, Jerry Reagan, Raigan, and it is a very weird spelling of that name. And apparently, they were probably worried that, Ronald Reagan, who was president of the Screen Actors Guild at the time, we probably didn't want to have some confusion or inference about him. But when I was watching the closed captioning, every time they refer to him as Reagan, they spell it Reagan. They spell it like the normal way. So it's just when Nora's yelling at him that they change the spelling. So I guess whoever's doing the closed captioning, they just weren't paying attention.
On on Wikipedia and stuff, it is listed with the weird spelling. So I assume
Oh,
not that we should
interesting. Yeah.
not that we should assume everything on Wikipedia is true, but I'm gonna
Right, right,
guess
right.
I'm gonna guess this
Yeah.
a little bit. I feel like it might be reasonably accurate because when I was doing the trivia stuff, I did notice that when
Yeah.
I was writing my here I if you saw my note when actually watching it was, so this is Ronald's first wife, Ray Gunn, which it's a
Yeah.
Gil Scott Heron reference if you know that track. When Reagan was elected, he just keeps going. He's talking. It's a song that is so B movie, very valid to these times as well. If you change all the names, but
Yeah, nice. Yeah,
the
very cool.
sentiment is always the political sentiment of the system is always real, right? But
Yeah,
yeah, he's like
yeah,
Reagan, Reagan. I'm like, yeah, that's great. That's what I call him now.
yeah. Very good.
Ronald Reagan. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah.
Okay, where was I going with that? I forgot. um, now, how about maybe you know more tales than I do about the notorious method actors. I made my note. You know, I bet
Yeah.
Daniel Day Lewis has been weirder on set than this before.
Yeah, I mean, there's always, I don't know, there are always weird stories about that, depending on who it is, and some of it I think you can chalk up to a very premeditated style of learning and a style of acting. And I get that, even though I may disagree with that. I mean, I think it was Sir Laurence Olivier, or maybe it was Sir Ian McKellen, who just said, like, no, you just act. You just show up and you act. You pretend. That's what you do, But, Brando made famous using the method, and that's really what propelled him to stardom. Uh, for I think for good, changed our expectation of what we see in TV and film, is that we see this more naturalistic, more realistic approach, instead of what was a whole generation of theater actors going over to film. And that's why it can be very jarring sometimes to watch, movies from the 1930s or 40s pre-method, where there's a lot of, big indicating about what's happening in the mind of that actor. But sometimes it works really well, and sometimes that's okay. It just depends on if that style is congruent with the rest of the story that's being told. I think, kind of going back to what we were talking about before, with actors actually losing themselves in the emotional reality of a role. Sometimes it's not even something that is actively done, like using the method, but it is something that is just a residual effect of being in those scenes. If you're in really intense emotional scenes all day long, that is physically and mentally draining on somebody who has to do that. And it's even more difficult than when you're shooting something out of order and you got to jump from one emotion to another, and you've got to forget dialogue so you can remember new dialogue. Like, it's for people who have said, like, oh, I could be an actor, chances are you can't, because it's really difficult work. And yeah, there are some people who maybe got lucky and got roles, and they aren't that great, or maybe because they fit a certain type that fits what's being cast. But people who are really top of their game, who are really excellent actors, there is a huge toll that it takes on them, because it is grueling work most of the time. And I don't doubt it. When people try to stay in a certain headspace when they're on set, because it can be very distracting to do something emotionally intense, and then you go to lunch and you're laughing it up with your fellow castmates, and then get back into something that's very emotionally intense. That's really hard to do. And I'm not surprised at all that actors will finish something, if it's particularly a long shoot, and they just need time to decompress. They need time to kind of find themselves again, so they're not stuck in the emotional reality of the job that they were doing. So yeah, I have a bit of sympathy for. I don't have sympathy for people who are jerks on set, because I've been around them, but I do have sympathy for people um, who put themselves in that difficult situation. It's really hard to do, and everybody has to have their own way of getting in and out of that moment, and just doing the hard work that's ahead of them.
Yeah. No, I'm sitting here listening to you, and I'm feeling like you're talking about great character actors, and I'm thinking about
Hmm.
some of the the pop stars as in acting, and I'm going to mention people I really
Yeah,
like here, so I'm not like trying
sure.
to
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
put dirt. Let's take Chris Pratt. When Chris Pratt shows up, he's going to Chris Pratt.
Yeah, yeah, right,
You
right.
know,
Exactly, exactly.
and I
You're
can't
hiring him, you're hiring him for that Prattness that he brings. Yeah.
and I can't remember him not prating. Tom
Yes.
Cruise, Tom Cruise, mostly the same. The last,
Yeah.
but with him, Then there's those outliers when he does Magnolia or does
Yeah.
Collateral or does that Tropic Thunder cameo, and that's when you're
Oh
like, oh, okay.
man.
Because when I watch Mission Impossible movies, I love them. I'm
Yeah.
like, he wants to do a crazy stunt. That's why he's here.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, I'm so glad you mentioned Collateral. That is such a good movie. I love that movie. But even then, whether it's something that is more serious and dark, like Collateral is, where he's playing the bad guy, or it's something that is a little more, well, a lot more of a comic book, like the Mission Impossible movies. If you didn't believe the emotional reality of the scenes, even in movies like the Mission Impossible, I forget which is the one with Philip Seymour Hoffman
The
as
third one, I think.
the third one. Yeah, like those scenes are what's memorable about those movies, because the stunts you'll just sort of, not that you'll forget the stunts, but the stunts will just stand out on their own, and you'll just be
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, Tom Cruise did a thing where he scaled this huge building or what, and that's fine. Like there is an art to that, 100%. But you really come away going like, oh, okay, well that was a good movie because I remember the things that resonated with me, which are emotional scenes that have some dramatic intensity or some dramatic reality to them. So, in the hands of a less skilled actor, those would always play as very false. I mean, it's like watching Daniel Craig as James Bond. You know that James Bond is going to survive. I won't say anything about that, but you know that James Bond ultimately is going to survive whatever encounter he has with the bad guy, but he's also got to make you believe that he is in danger, and that it is a legitimately dangerous situation that he's in. So you take a big comic book character like James Bond, and I know he's not. No, he didn't come from a comic book, but I'm using that in
Pulp
little
novels,
C,
close
little
enough.
b. Yeah, yeah, a comic book-ish character like James Bond, and you still have to believe the emotional reality of his world. You know, so yeah, there's an art to all of that. And I get it. Like, I've been on enough sets where for professionals it's understood. You don't go bother people while they're at work. You don't you don't just chat up the actors when they're on a break or whatever, because you just don't. Like, if you're filming a scene where you've got 50 people on a crew and however many actors around, and maybe there are extras, background players as well, you've potentially got a set with hundreds of people on it. If those hundreds of people, every time you cut a scene, are just like goofing off and trying to get a picture and trying to get an autograph or whatever, like, I was I was watching a show. I'm not going to name names, but I was all right. I was watching a live performance of somebody, and he was sort of, it was very weird because he was sort of at the same time of the performance, like giving you his resume. Here are all the things that I've worked on. And there's a shot of him with his arm around a very A-list star, like super stratospheric A-list star. And this guy was definitely not a co-star in this production. He was like an uncredited, a background player. But there he is, like on a break with his arm around this very big A-list star. And I just thought, like, how long after that picture was taken was this guy escorted off set? Because if it had been my set, absolutely this person would have been escorted off the set. Dude, this is not your movie. This is not your time. And please do not break the concentration of the main actor here. It
I'm
is
gonna
not cool.
I'm gonna name names. That's Troy McClure, right?
Straight.
For that
There you go.
second.
There you go. Yeah.
May
You
remember me from such
got
films
it.
as yeah. So as I said, I don't act. I haven't been on sets much, and if they were,
Yeah.
you can't call them real sets. But I do have an analogy. I played in a lot of orchestras, so
Okay.
you sit down in the cello. I'm a cello player, so you sit down in the cello section. It's considered bad form to whip out a sonata and start like going through it or something. Like you're supposed
Yeah.
to sit there
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
practice the music like you're about to be practicing, right? So
Yeah, yeah.
and sonatas and things like that are just like way beyond like general orchestra music. Like I could play the orchestra stuff for 20 years before I actually started to learn how to play that stuff. So
Gotcha.
I
Yeah.
did get a massive ego bump 2 weeks ago because of COVID. We're still having weird rehearsals, so it was just four cellos in a large room, and
Uh,
and I started off as the fourth chair, being the foreigner who can barely even function in Japanese. So but by the end of the session, since it was the first time they could actually hear me play, I was pumped up to first chair and being handed all the solo parts. So I was like,
yeah.
okay, I do know how to play this thing. Good.
Right, right.
Now in a rock band, it's the opposite. You're going to show up to practice with and just start like shredding on your guitar, which is
Sure.
extra funny because you're not going to do that in any of the actual music because that's a
Sure,
terrible
sure, sure.
idea.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Oh God.
but I do feel like the orchestra probably is a little more like a film set. There's a Czech film that has a good analogy on it. I think it's a fireman's ball, which basically I think they do it too as a metaphor for politics, like House of
Hmm.
Parliament or something. But
Okay.
that's a real interesting one where it's using the
Interesting.
orchestra's metaphor for the Parliament. But I think it works for a movie set to a certain degree as well.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you know,
Well, and a movie set, depending on the scale, is a little bit like an army. I mean, you have to rely on every every level, every role doing its job correctly, whether it is the lowest paid PA to anybody above the line, the major actors or the director or whomever. Like everybody has to be doing their role in concert. Bring it back to the orchestra
right.
metaphor there, or else the whole thing falls apart. And stupid things do happen, like the one person who's you know standing way offset, but their phone rings or they drop something or whatever, and you ruin a take that takes possibly hours, if not days and months of prep work to get to that moment. So
Yeah,
yeah.
you can flub a few notes in your string section, but if there's a big like if there's a big stop or something, then so it's like brrr, that's gonna be
Yeah,
really
yeah,
that's
yeah, yeah,
really
yeah,
people are gonna notice that. So
yeah, yeah, exactly.
I have a few questions, but before I start asking them, are there any other points you really want to hit on here?
Not really. Yeah, no, no, I don't think so. I think I got through all the, let's see, talked about the bad ADR with the girl, talked about the Herman music, how awful Nora is, but awful, I mean wonderful. She's just, she's chewing scenery. So yeah,
Okay.
yeah, those are the major points.
I'm looking through my notes and just two things that I missed. One is I tried and failed to build a theremin when I was in high school. Um,
Oh, I'm so sorry.
well, I have a mini moog now. Mini moogs can do that.
Oh, cool.
You
Yeah.
can it's not a theremin, but it's close enough. It's better in most ways.
Nice,
The
nice.
the other one's a question for you.
Okay.
I know in Malta you can still visit the Popeye village.
That's right. Yeah.
And here's what and when I can't imagine the answer is yes, but I really hope it is. Is there anything left of Intolerance's Babylon sets in LA?
Oh God. Wow. Wow. I don't think so. The most recent sort of movie set road trips that I want to take, because I know that there are remnants of them. If you go west and you go out toward like Malibu and the canyons out there, one is the 4077, so the MASH set. The set isn't there, but you can tell the scenery that
Mm.
was there. And then Ape City from Planet of the Apes, bringing it back to Planet of the Apes. There are pieces of that still out there. And if you go north, I'm going to forget exactly what town it's near, but the legendary story, which apparently is true, is that C.B. DeMille shot his original Ten Commandments, not the 1950s one with Charlton Heston and Yul Brynner, but his original silent in the 20s, I think, and built these incredible sets and just covered them all over with sand. So they're somewhere up north, and somebody has found pieces of this. So they're there. So
Must be
that's the closest I can get you.
that must be right next to where they buried all the Atari 2600 ET games.
Yeah, right.
But my hometown's Atlanta. I bet you. I'm sure you spent some time there because your hometown's
Of
not too far.
course.
But yeah,
Yeah,
what
yeah, yeah.
just so many well, I don't know about now, but a few years ago, so many film productions were there, and
Yeah, no, there's a ton. I mean, Hollywood keeps losing so many of them. Yeah.
because I
Yeah.
was watching Cobra Kai and they're coming out of a movie theater. I'm like, wow, that really looks like where I would take my dates in high school. And I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
I look it up, Cobra Kai filmed in Atlanta, used the mall as a location. I'm like, oh, it is. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I couldn't get past in Black Panther, the Museum of Great Britain, which is Atlanta's High Museum,
Oh yeah, yeah.
with
And the High Museum is
interiors.
great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they even have a few interiors in there. And there's something else that the High Museum was recently used for. It really. Oh, I think it was an Okinawa setting in a later Cobra Kai. Okay,
Oh, very
in that
cool.
show, I
Yeah.
think they did film the first season of that in LA, but then switched to Atlanta. So like the first season, I didn't notice anything, right? And second, I'm like,
Yeah.
some of this looks really familiar now.
Yeah. And they keep doing those tax breaks. I mean, good for them. Georgia Film Commission has been active for a long time, and they've really stepped it up in the last decade or so. By the way, I don't want to keep your audience hanging, but the answer is the Dunes Center in Guadalupe, California. And apparently, the movie was shot in 1923, and then the early 80s. Some of the stuff was discovered, or at least that was when the initial expedition to go find it was started. And now whatever has been recovered and identified, there is actually a place. There's the Dunes Center where you can go visit. So
Film archaeology. Wow.
yeah, right, right, right. Yep.
um, so as I have a few questions. The first one here, I always think it's obvious. Sometimes it's not. But who in this episode went into the Twilight Zone?
Ooh, yeah. I mean, I think this is pretty obvious that it's Jerry Reagan who went into the Twilight Zone.
Or is it author? Could it be author?
Well, see, I think we as the audience have to go with the premise that the movie set exists, that the movie studio exists in our reality. And all these, because we actually get to leave the studio and we go to Jerry's house, we go to, we're driving along the streets of LA. So I think that is our reality, at least, that we're seeing.
Actually,
I have,
that's where it's interesting because it's not obvious because I watched the episode 5 times and
yeah.
actually I was buying authors as being the
You think
reality.
Arthur's reality is real?
Maybe it's
So,
because again I haven't spent so much time on sets. So to the viewer that hasn't spent a bunch of time on sets, maybe that part has an unreal feeling.
okay, so let's think about it this way then. This is good. This is good stuff. So Arthur is having the mental break because maybe he doesn't appreciate so much his life. Maybe he doesn't appreciate his wife Marion and the kid whose name that we're just not going to remember. Um, so this is his reality, his mind sort of playing a trick on him, so that maybe he can get back to his reality as Arthur Curtis. It's
Yeah, I
like
guess I was
imagine,
coming
yeah,
from the
imagine
capper
how much
perspective.
worse it would be. Imagine how much worse it would be if you were married to Nora Reagan.
Right. So I'm watching this as It's a Wonderful Life.
Hmm. Hmm.
Again, I'm not disagreeing with you. You said that, and it like hadn't occurred to me. It's, I think same on your end. So it's like, oh yeah, it is interesting that way too, isn't it? So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
uh, where
Well,
it makes it
then
good.
I guess the question remains, and we will throw that out to the audience:
Yeah,
whose reality is real?
like I said, it's not always obvious. So my second point was going to be everyone in that alternate reality. Like don't actually exist, or you could again coin flip. It could be like author's family and stuff. So
Yeah, right,
so I
right,
was like going
right.
to mention that whoever doesn't actually exist may also be like either of the Twilight Zone or victims of the Twilight Zone.
Mm. Hmm. Oh, wow. Yeah,
Um,
okay. They might be.
the second question I'm finding more and more that the it's a vague question, but you do that in your own podcast, so I like it that way. So
Yeah.
you define this word how you want, but
Okay.
let's call it. I'll ask you by saying it's Jerry. Okay. Did
Okay.
Jerry deserve his trip into the Twilight Zone?
If Jerry is real, then yes, because it's sort of the most like it's one of the most sort of gentle trips into the Twilight Zone that he can take. It's one of the most it's sort of like the Twilight Zone showing its kindness, the way that it did in the 16 millimeter shrine. It's like we don't have to assume that she's dead. We don't have to assume that there's something worse on the other end. We just have to assume that she got what she wanted, wherever that may be. And the Twilight Zone is many things to many people. So if this is the Twilight Zone giving some relief to Jerry in order to be Arthur, then that's okay. All
So
right.
I'll take it as it being author then, in which case the guy is having like, like a Kafka moment. I mean, this is
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
this
yeah.
if it's author, this is absolutely a haunted house.
Yeah.
So
Well, but again, but to what end? It's like because you end with this sort of presumed happy ending where he gets to hop on that TWA plane with his wife and go somewhere, maybe only to face more psychological horrors. but but it seems like it's like the Twilight Zone is there to give a reset to this guy.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know? Yeah.
But is it a pleasurable reset or a horrible reset, I guess? And that depends on what perspective you're coming from.
It
So
might just be the pleasure of the banality of his life.
yeah, I mean, like for me, author's job, what is his sales experience? Is he's a salesman?
Something like that,
That's
yeah.
that's a nightmare for
Yeah,
me.
yeah, it sounds like it, yeah. But at
You know,
least he gets that one vacation a year. At least he has that.
that's that's its own existential dread where Jerry's like hit the scene, maybe he's feels terrible about himself, but he'll have an autobiography to write that Jerry will not.
Yeah, right, right, right.
So yeah, what's better, a pleasurable life or an interesting life? That's a good
Yeah,
question.
yeah. I lean toward interesting, but yeah. Yeah.
I've tried to combine a little bit of both as much as I can, but
Sure,
that
of
that
course.
balance, right? The middle path.
Yeah, yeah.
On a scale of 0 to 5, 5 being super trippy, 0 being not trippy, where do you want to place this episode?
Wait, I'm sorry. 5 is super trippy,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, yeah, yeah. 0 is not trippy at all. I mean, this one is about this one is about like a 2. Maybe 2.5 if I'm being generous, but it's not super trippy. It's like it's all a very kind of self-contained thing, and I think the only trippy thing about it is the conversation that you and I are having, which is the real reality as far as the experience for whomever the reality is occurring, or the slip into the Twilight Zone is occurring. um, it's a pretty contained thing, and it doesn't really affect anybody outside of this one person, or the duality of this one person. It's not like it's an earth-shattering moment that affects the entire population, the entirety of humanity. It's not like it upends our understanding of the universe or anything like that. So it's trippy-ish, but only if you're in his shoes.
I'm going to throw a curveball and actually give this my first 5.
Whoa, really? Are you, so what about this is so trippy
So I
that
guess I'm going to
you're
define
yeah.
what I mean by trippy. One, I've been
Okay.
finding my numbers often have to do with that one effect. And this
Okay.
one, to me, it's trippy because you don't even notice it really. to
Uh-huh.
me, to
Uh-huh.
me, that's part of my definition. Like again, I mentioned the fever, the walking, talking slot machine. I think Mark,
Yeah.
the co-host, I think he went 2.5 on it if I remember. I went
Okay.
up to 3 because I thought that effect was so whack. I'm giving it a 3 for the effect. But yeah, the rest of that episode is not particularly trippy,
Yeah.
right? It's all the slot
Yeah,
machine.
yeah.
But this one, I was thinking 5 before we went on air, and then after
Uh
our conversation, I'm like, I cannot say this is not 5 because this is, to me, this is like the you know
the
the
pinnacle of trippiness.
in my younger days when I might have been doing some enhanced music listening.
Uh-huh.
I
Okay.
when it
Yeah.
I I love 60s rock, and I thought I'm going to listen to Pink Floyd's Piper at the Gates of Dawn and the Millenniums Began and just trip out, right?
Yeah.
But the album that got me the hardest, that really tweaked my brain around, was Pet Sounds, which I never thought of being particularly psychedelic before that.
Mm. Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's
Yeah. Yeah.
really subtle trippiness. So yeah, I'm like, I guess there's a certain subtlety that I like in my trippiness.
Okay. Okay. That
So
that's fair. There are other episodes that I think of as more. I mean, not that this one doesn't have some universal appeal, and that is one of the beauties of the Twilight Zone is that the truths and the challenges that they find are always universal because they're always about identity and existence and kind of your place in the universe. We just happen to be playing it out through these very extreme examples like this, somebody having a mental break, you know. But I think, you know, some of the, I don't know, I think that there are other episodes that I would say are trippier because they have these sort of, the stakes are higher, you know? Not that
mm,
that necessarily defines whether something is trippy or not. I mean, and you're doing everything in order, right? You're releasing every episode in
that's
order.
right.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So I won't spoil it by getting to, you know, what I think are some
Actually,
extremely trippy
I was
episodes.
gonna I was gonna
Yeah.
ask you that actually. It's that I mean, you don't really spoil a 60-year old
Okay.
show, but
Yeah.
I was just gonna throw out one that I haven't watched it particularly recently because it's gonna be watching in like 3 months. But To
Yeah.
Serve Man, I feel like is one that people would generally say was one of the trippier ones. I'm not sure I will when I watch it again.
No, I don't think it's that trippy. I think it's a good sci-fi premise, but again, it is an episode that is building to its twist.
Yeah.
And sometimes those episodes are very effective, and other times you just go like, "Oh, okay, they could have done this in 15 minutes." I can tell why this maybe was a very effective short story, but as TV, you can't always just be building to the twist and then
Mm.
that's it, you know. I feel like an episode like A Stop at Willoughby is very trippy. Like that ranks a
Mm.
5 for me because not only does it toy with your sense of sympathy for the character, but then it has this very dark dark ending, but a very dark, I think, question to the audience at the end. It's like, are we okay with essentially a suicide as an out? Is that a better option for this guy?
Okay,
You
we'll call
know?
we'll call that a teaser then, because I still got you on the list for that one.
Okay, okay, all right.
It's like, oh, don't
This
talk
is
about that one.
yeah, yeah. We won't talk about that one. This is a you know, what we're talking about today is a far less dark version of that, like
That's
allowing a character
yes.
to go do something that may be better for them, you
Mm-mm-mm.
know? And in
But
this case, it's get on a TWA plane.
well,
Yeah.
well, yeah, we'll definitely get back into that one. I'm sitting here
Yeah, yeah.
thinking of what would I go, what be other fives for me on that. Um, I would vote The Midnight Sun for that. Also, an obvious twist at the end, but just the whole thing. It's
Sure.
post-apocalyptic, which is or mid-apocalyptic, I guess I should say.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, but
Yeah, or you know, Long Live Walter Jameson is you know that is an age old no pun intended that is an age old parable uh, that you know we all have this sense of wanting immortality in
up.
some way or another, you know.
And that's next
But
week's. People get to hear that too.
oh, hey, right on it. Okay,
No,
so I'm
no,
not going to spoil it,
no. I've
but
already, I've already recorded that one, and yes, it's a very trippy conversation
yeah,
with. So
because it's a trippy episode, you know. On its surface, yeah, it's a pretty obvious parable,
and for
but
another
it's trippy.
teaser, I made sure to get a guest for that one who wants to talk about Anunnaki and stuff. So
Nice. All right. We
So
listen to that one.
next
Yeah.
week, back to weird.
Yeah. Right. Right. Right.
um, I don't know. I don't think I should call your podcasts weird. I just like them. Do you want them to be weird?
No, I mean, mission log doesn't need to be weird. We leave the weirdness to whenever Star Trek decides to get weird, which it doesn't always. Although, we're early in Star Trek Voyager's run, and that's where Brannon Braga has a lot of say in what's happening. And the dude just has like a weird sense of humor and a weird sense of storytelling, and he definitely is a fan of stuff like this, Twilight Zone and horror and darker stories. So when he has his fingerprints on a story in Voyager, you can absolutely tell. Just, and he had fewer opportunities on TNG, but you can tell. So when Star
Yeah,
Trek gets weird, we like to talk about the weirdness.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a big Braga fan.
Yeah.
And Voyager is something else I saw in your Discord, but mentioning the Beach Boys again, for me, Voyager's like
Yes.
the Beach Boys of
Yes.
Star Trek.
Right.
They got your
Right.
pet sounds and smile. There's Timeless. I mean, there's
Yeah.
Year in Hell, just some of the best Trek ever. And then
Yeah.
there's the episode that I'm just gonna listen to your recap for tonight.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Honestly, I
Yeah.
just didn't
Yeah.
feel like watching. I watched it last year because I was listening along with the Delta Flyers podcast, which has
Yeah. Right on.
Tom and
Yeah.
Harry, right? So I was
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
this is one I'm just not going to watch again. I think
Yeah.
it's kind of
Yeah.
harrowing to watch. I mean, you could even
It
call it a good episode, but it's just I don't like watching this.
it sucks. Yeah. 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 It's not good. And by the way, stick around for Norm's rant at the end
Okay,
of that. Patreon only,
okay,
because otherwise we just have to be bleeping it every 3 seconds.
that'll be fun.
Yeah.
I got you to drop something on the show once so I can like bleep it, but
Yeah.
um
Absolutely.
anyway, one more time, give them that website for the
Sure.
fantastic podcast, usually not weird at Mission Log.
Thanks, man. Yeah, podcast.roddenberry.com. Our flagship show, the one we've been talking about, is Mission Log, but then there's others, it's Mission Log Live, Trek Files, Sci-Fi 5, etc. But go to podcast.roddenberry.com, and surely you will find something there to add to your podcast rotation.
And as for this one, it's Time Enough Podcast. On Twitter, it's Time Enough Pod. It's on Facebook under that sort of name. On Patreon, we're under the Patreon umbrella. I said Patreon twice. Podcastius, Peep Show reference. And we also have Matt and Luke's Sci-Fi Sanctuary, where we talk about sci-fi films. What else is there? Oh, the Game Show. That's a new one where it's a bunch of British guys having a game show about games, asking
Oh,
gaming
very
questions.
cool. Can't
And
go wrong there. Yeah.
I don't listen, even as a guy in this little constructive podcast, I don't always listen to gaming ones. I do listen to this one. It's funny. So
Oh,
I
cool.
give that my wholehearted recommendation. In fact, I think the new episode's dropping sometime today. So
Very cool. Very, very cool.
okay. Anyway, John, don't look behind you. I'm going to end it there. That's my cut. I need to walk out myself in about 20 minutes, but I wanted to bring up two topics if you got a few minutes, and I thought
Sure,
I'd save it
absolutely.
recording. One is
Absolutely.
I was realizing I haven't invited you to the Sci-Fi one recently, which is the one people actually listen to. And
Mm-hmm.
my thought was we haven't done any Irwin Allens yet, and it seems like
Oh, very cool.
I
Yeah.
don't know.
I
Is
can
there one
get
that
down with some.
lights your fire?
I mean, are you doing like a series in general? Are you doing episodes of series? What's your approach for
Oh,
what do you
this is
think
the
about for
film one.
Irwin
So I
Allen?
was thinking one of the movies.
Oh,
So
okay.
it'd either be 60s trippy sci-fi or 70s disaster, which I'm willing to call sci-fi.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, that's interesting. Let me think on that. I would be down for some Irwin Allen for sure. Now, wait, he did not produce. Did he produce the original, the movie Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea? I mean, and obviously he did the series, but I
Yeah,
can't
yeah.
remember if.
I assume yes, he did because I had the DVD from way back in the day that had the double feature Fantastic Voyage and Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea.
Okay, got it.
So those were that's what I was thinking of for trippy sci-fi. Those two movies. So even if he doesn't have the directing credit, I mean, it's
Yeah.
still or did he even Yeah, I feel like he did a lot of movies where he didn't direct them, but it's definitely his movie.
Yeah, no, he's got a producer credit on a ton of stuff that he didn't actually direct. Let me check the director. Oh, City Beneath the Sea. We just did a Sci-Fi 5 on that because it sucks. Yeah, it's not good. Um, let's see here, but you go back. Oh my God, The Man from the 25th Century. I so want to watch. It was a short that was an attempt to do a TV series. He directed the Land of the Giants pilot. He directed the Time Tunnel pilot. He directed the Lost in Space pilot. As I guess as he did with Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. Yeah, and then the movie Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea he directed as well. All right, but let's go to his producer credits because
I
you
think
go to
you're gonna
that,
find more there.
yeah, that sweet period. Of course, all the series we just mentioned. Voyage, yeah, Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. He did the movie. 5 weeks in a balloon. I don't. Time tunnel, Lost in Space. Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. So, he did not do Fantastic Voyage.
Okay, not even producer.
Yeah.
Okay.
No.
Anyway,
No.
that feels so Aaron Allen, doesn't it? Allen.
It does. It does. Yeah. Um,
Anyway, it's not like it has to be Aaron Allen. So if you were like, "Hey, I want to do Fantastic Voyage," right on.
I mean, I love that movie, and I would love an excuse to revisit it. But if we do go with, like, I could definitely get down for the movie Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. That would be cool. And if you just, yeah, I mean, this TV short, The Man from the 25th Century, is so weird. It's got Jimmy Darren in it.
Oh, cool.
So, yeah, clearly he liked to work with him.
Well, what we could do
Um,
is kind of if bundle that short and do the film because
sure.
I'm
Yeah.
I'm thinking about doing a new podcast, but at the moment I still have the oral hygiene going, so that would be perfect for
Oh,
that.
right on.
And
Yeah.
I'm thinking of doing oral hygiene basically where it's just like when I feel like it.
Okay,
Because I
cool.
did for a while three
Cool.
times a week for some reason. Now it's just once a week, and
Wow,
yeah.
that's a lot. That's a
Yeah.
lot.
Well, it was my workshop for like learning how to do podcasts, I think, because that, a few people listen to that one, but not that many. So, I was like, this is me getting used to talking to guests by myself, right? And like producing it
Yeah.
all by
Yeah.
myself, because, in the Luke and Matt Sci-Fi Sanctuary, I've always got a co-chair, right? So I was like, oh, I'll
Yeah.
try doing it myself. And,
Yeah.
and I don't know, I'm just eyeing stuff like the Space 1999 box set up there. So,
Oh, dude. Dude. Yeah. I mean, here's I'm just looking at Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, and I'm thinking that that could be a good chat because the more I think about it and try to put it into context, this I can make a good case for this being the demarcation line between 50s sci-fi and 60s
ooh,
sci-fi.
yes. Okay, that sounds like a
Yeah.
selling point. So,
Yeah.
I'll probably get to you about that because we have the Japanese vacation week coming up soon. My own vacation week. So,
Right on. Right
so I'm
on.
probably
Very
be looking
cool.
at time after the first week of May, but I'll get back to you on that.
Okay.
The second topic, and honestly,
Hmm.
if I back, maybe this is like engage material if you want, but
Hmm.
which
Yeah.
is one of
Yeah.
the reasons
Sure.
I still have to record on. But I, like I'm an avid Trekkie. I'm always interested in astronomy, but I have like a pretty strong mystical side too, which
Uh-huh.
came through, especially in DS9 with the prophets and stuff, which came
Sure.
through
Of
with,
course.
now it's coming through with, Chakotay. And,
Yep. Yep.
so I meditate like probably not a ton, but 30 minutes to an hour a day, like at a temple or something,
Good for you. Yeah.
I,
Good.
I've not like a Tibetan monk who focuses on this all the time and probably does it every day, but about once every 6 months, I manage a wild method, which really is kind of fits in with that Voyager episode a few weeks ago.
Interesting.
Do you
Okay.
know? Do you know what the
Uh,
wild method
I
is?
don't. I don't. Tell me.
Okay,
But you
this
know,
is
but the episode you mean the cloud, right?
yeah, I think
The,
that's the one. Yeah,
yeah. Yeah.
the spirit animals and
Yeah.
such.
Yeah. It's where he reveals his
But yeah,
medicine bundle. Yeah.
so the first time I did this, I was like it turned out I was actually using the position they suggest in Southeast Asia. So I was like, oh, I just stumbled into that, which
Uh-huh.
should just past lives me. I just knew to do that. But
Very cool.
it's a waking induced lucid dreaming. That means you lie
Whoa.
down in your bed, you let your
Okay.
body go to sleep. That's like sleep paralysis. You don't let your mind go to sleep, which
Yeah.
that's a trick, right? It's hard
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
But when it works, you start getting the hypnagogic
Yeah.
imagery.
Yeah.
that sort of
Yeah.
stuff. And then you start seeing kind of cloudy. This is my experience. It might be different for someone else.
Yeah.
Then you kind of
It's
start seeing cloudy images, like I'll see like a building or faces, and
okay.
and that stage is that I can get that going about once a month, right? And then once every 6 months, one of those images crystallizes and I go into it, and now I'm in the dream.
Wow.
And again, that's like, I mean, I'm like, even now, I'm like, it sounds stupid me telling you this, right? But I'm like, well, I've
No,
done
no,
it.
but I mean,
I've done it multiple times.
but that's pretty cool though, because if you had the experience, then obviously your brain remembers that experience. So whatever that recall mechanism is that's there, is firing, is going
It,
off.
and you
That's
mentioned
very cool.
Janeway just talking about it on the bridge, and I know, like at my job, like another guy who had also managed it, he said it was painful, and I was like, "What?" But anyway,
Wow.
we're
Wow.
sitting there talking about it in the office. I'm like, "Oh, that's right." I mean, I guess we weren't captain, but
Yeah, right.
kind of the same thing, right? Like,
Right, right,
because
right.
I know one guy would definitely was uncomfortable about us talking that directly about our dreams and the kind of like, like shaman experiences around him.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you weren't responsible for flying your workplace through a nebula to try to get home, so that the
Yeah,
stakes
on
might
your
have
own
been a
time.
little bit different. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Right.
But and
Fascinating.
and
That's
the
very
and the
cool.
first time I this really worked actually was funny because I ended up on the bridge of a blowing up starship. Like,
Wow.
got
Okay.
got
Well,
into the
hey.
I think in the dream I actually was like supposed to be Spock and get into an
Wow.
escape pod and go down to the planet. I went through this big like kind of like construct,
Uh
kind of like going through that temple part of the Jungle Cruise, but more sci-fi. Um,
huh. Okay.
and then I
Very
landed and I
cool.
get out and there's all these like floating blobs and colors, and again the guide, someone that started talking to me, and I started distinguishing people like NPCs in my dream from things that actually, again, that could just be deep parts of your psyche. I got my
Yeah.
head in science
Whatever.
too, but
Yeah.
yeah, the main point being like,
Mhm.
yeah, definitely didn't like Siska's ending with the prophets and or the prophets themselves, but
Oh, the prophets. The prophets are the worst.
the idea of
They're
the
yeah.
interdimensional being, I was on with that. I just kind of wish they could have finessed it a little better,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then yeah, Chakotay is definitely like a. I don't even. What do people think of Chakotay? I don't even know. I know
Well,
they think of Neelix.
it's no, it's really interesting. Like the only person who I have ever heard just express outright hatred for Chakotay is Holly,
Oh, I keep
and I
hearing her say it. That's why. Okay.
yes, and I cannot wait. I think we need to give it some time. I think we need to be like a good halfway into the series. And I want to do I want to do a feedback episode, but I want to have Holly because I want her to make her case for why she hates Chakotay. And it's interesting because like we just recorded Emanations, which was a very good episode for a lot of reasons. And one of the first things we pointed out is it all takes place in the teaser. This moment where Chakotay and Kim are having a difference of opinion about how to proceed in this burial ground for these alien bodies that they've just stumbled into, they've beamed themselves into, and it was a very good and very respectful conversation, with Chakotay being, as you would expect, with him being a little more sensitive to the idea, like, hey, we're in a place that means something or meant something to the civilization that put these people here, put their dead here, so we have to tread lightly and blah blah blah. And I think it was a great conversation to have. But then he says, like, to turn your tricorders off. Like, dude, come on. It just, like, it's okay to get information. You're already here, okay? But yeah, but so we were both like, oh, this is really good. Like, they're this is what Star Trek should do, like presenting perspectives, you know even though, like, we feel like Chakotay took it a step too far, but you needed him there to be that guy to say what needed to be said, you
Yeah, I
know
guess I'd want to
so
be that guy, or I'd be that guy on the starship crew. I don't know, but I've heard you say before, every episode is someone's favorite and everyone's
It's
someone's least favorite.
somebody's least favorite.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
know we're waiting for Threshold there, which I don't think I've seen Threshold recently. But one I do like that everyone hates is I
Uh-huh.
don't remember her name, but it's the one where they're stuck in chaotic space and Chakotay's like mind boxing, and
Oh God.
it's again it's
Wow.
just like
Yeah.
super trippy. It gets a 5
Yeah.
on the
Yeah. Yeah.
tripometer,
Yeah.
so I'm like,
Yeah.
and people generally hate that episode, I think, but I was just like, yeah, I like this. This is great.
As I recall, like when I watched it years and years and years ago, I didn't dislike Chakotay, but I like obviously you like the characters that everybody likes, like the Doctor and Seven of Nine, who's great. And I've found myself this time around liking Janeway a lot more and liking Kess more than I thought I would. Still pretty ambivalent about Neelix, and I'm still just kind of ambivalent about Chakotay. I feel like the thing that I didn't like the first time around was that I kind of sped my way through to get to the end of the series, and I was like, okay, why are we now doing romantic plot lines with Chakotay? This does not work for me, whether it's with the captain or with Seven of Nine. This is, come on, just let him be. Um, and now that I've gotten to restart it, I'm just sort of ambivalent about him, not as full of disappointment as I was when I watched it all the way through the first time.
Well, I remember on Enterprise, it took me a
Hmm.
really long time to warm up to Dr. Phlox because I was having Neelix withdrawal, I think.
Yeah,
I
sure,
was like
sure,
the oh
sure.
no, not another whimsical alien. And now in
Yeah,
Phlox's case, he's fantastic. But I was just like, oh god, he's
yeah.
going to be the Neelix of the show, isn't he?
Oh,
Which is
that's
not the case.
funny. No, no, that's funny. And actually, I'm going to see John tomorrow. No, Saturday night. Um, and yeah, he would be the first to say like, "Oh God, not another whimsical alien."
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
No, it took my dad to warm up actually because
yeah,
he was like, oh, I kind of like this guy. He makes me think of Mash.
yeah, yeah. Right, right,
Yeah,
right.
and then
Yeah,
the off-putting smile, of course, is a little off-putting at first. That
yeah. That's weird.
and
Yeah,
and that
yeah,
and that I think maybe is where
yeah,
the Neelix vibe came in. But
yeah,
yeah, but anyway, the main
yeah.
point is I was like, hey, there are Trekkies out there that are pretty down with the Trek, and I'd also like to explore other planes of the air. So
Sure. Yeah, yeah.
I'm,
Well,
I'm
I
always
mean,
I'm always a sucker for the Traveler, even though he looks weird. But
yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, post obviously, you're active in our Discord, which is great. And then if there's stuff that you want to flag, like, hey, talk about this and engage or whatever, then that would be cool because I'd love to do that.
radio.
Yeah. All right,
Anyway,
man.
I'm going to start my journey to work.
All right.
I'll go ahead and send you this file as well, but I will do that when I get home tonight. Again, the
Cool.
reason I'm dressed this way is because I'm just walking straight out the door. And yeah, you
Awesome,
should
man.
look good for your podcast, right?
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
If I can make
Exactly.
it work together, that's even for the best.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, have a great day at work, and I will save this audio in case you need it. And
Thank you
talk to
much.
you soon. All right, man.
Later.
Be good.